Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for staying with us for this last panel of the discussion. And we talk a lot about traps, difficulties, challenges. So maybe there is some light at the end of the tunnel, and we will be talking about nuclear energy. And it was interesting to hear in the last panel and previous panels also, many expressing hopes that nuclear could be part of the solution, again part of the solution for European energy security and our climate equation. It's a new discussion, a relatively new discussion, as we hear also voices from biggest opponent country, Germany. Mr. Lambsdorff expressed himself in favor, so it's interesting to see that there is a discussion ongoing, there is a revival of interest around nuclear energy. So let me right now turn to the last panel of this Warsaw Security Forum Energy and Climate track, where we will exactly talk about nuclear as part of our strategic autonomy, or is it the source of new dependencies? And I warmly welcome Wojciech Jakóbik, well-known Polish author, journalist, and also somebody who has spent a lot of time discussing and talking and convincing for nuclear in Poland. Wojtek, the floor is yours for running this exceptional panel.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Let's have a seat. Let's have another interesting discussion on energy security, this time nuclear power, especially in the context of security autonomy on one hand and supply dependence on the other, as it is written here. So that should be true about the topic of our discussion. My name is Wojciech Jakóbik. I'm writing on energy for a decade, and I'm especially devoted to energy security approach when it comes to journalism works, and I'm really interested about our discussion about nuclear energy, especially in the specific context of what's happening in Ukraine, in Zaporizhia occupied nuclear power plant on the one hand, but on the other hand in Poland, because we are on the verge of decision. With whom will we build the nuclear power plant? I hope we will, and we'll make this decision. So I would like to introduce Mr. Mateusz Berger, who is the government Plenipotentiary for strategic energy infrastructure in Poland. Big applause, of course. We have a distinguished guest from Canada, Mr. Stéphane Dion, who is the Prime Minister's Special Envoy in EU and Europe. He was also the Minister of Foreign Affairs in 2015 to 17 and chair of COP11. Great to have you here, sir. And we have Agnieszka Kaźmierczak, who is the Director General inside EURATOM, which is energy supply, nuclear supply agency in Europe, as we all know. So, as I spoke, great to have you here. Let's start with our Canadian guest. I would ask about this tension that we've heard about in previous panel between the climate and security. There are multiple questions about nuclear energy, especially right now. We are looking for security autonomy in Europe, but there are fears. So what's the Canadian take on it?
Thank you very much, Mr. Jakóbik. Thank you, everyone. So the question is, what is the view of Canada about nuclear? There's military and civil. And Canada think we need to dissociate the two completely to be sure we'll not have a proliferation. That's very key. On military, we all want a world without nuclear weapons. But the issue is, should it be done unilaterally by NATO or in a concerted way through the existing agreements and treaties? Of course, Canada is of the view that it cannot be done unilaterally. but it's clear that we should never use weapons of this kind anymore. It should be done in a concerted way through our treaties, and Canada is pushing for a fissile cutoff treaty for years. We hope everybody will support us for that. It would be a great help. We should condemn, the whole world should condemn the threat of President Putin to use nuclear weapons. That's something I think should not be even under discussion, should be a universal commitment to fight it. About civil nuclear, Canada, I think, is part of the energy mix. We need to do it properly. We need to do it with a lot of security. It's 10%, 15% of our electricity mix in Canada, and it's very safe. And we are ready to offer to the world the possibility to be less dependent on Russian source of nuclear energy. We are a top producer of uranium. We have a strong technology, the CANDU reactor. SMRs will be a leader of the world. We had a mission in Poland only last week to see what we can do in Poland to support Poland in your nuclear ambitions, and it's something in which we believe. About climate change, we think nuclear should be part of the solution, is the view of the IPCC, is the view of the International Energy Agency. If we try to do it without nuclear and only with renewables, it's technically possible, but it will be awfully more costly, very much more complicated to cope with the intermittency of these sources of energy. So I have the numbers to discuss with you, but I think it's very clear that nuclear should be part of a solution if we want to be carbon neutral for 2050, which is a very demanding goal.
Thank you. I have just one supplementary question about the Polish-Canadian cooperation in IAEA when it comes to Zaporizhia blackmailing with nuclear energy by Russia. What's your take on this?
Well, the take of it is that Canada and Poland led a resolution in order to be sure that this would be condemned. And I'm very pleased of this partnership with Poland. It has been accepted. So we need to support all the efforts that are done to be sure that this war will not create a nuclear catastrophe.
And I think we all sign under this appeal. So let's move to European Commission, to EURATOM, and to Ms. Kaźmierczak, who could speak some more about this supply issue, because we have an obvious supply issue when it comes to natural gas. We see that there is one dominant supplier which is not providing the supply as it was to provide, and it brings us to a conclusion: we need to change something. Is the nuclear energy a part of the solution in the context of nuclear fuel supply, which is a concern of EURATOM?
Mm-hmm. Perhaps I'll start by a small disclaimer, because I am speaking here on behalf of the Euratom Supply Agency and not on behalf of the European Commission.
Yeah, Euratom is inside.
Euratom is sort of satellite to the European Union, so the same member states are as members of the EU. However, the agency is independent. It is under the political supervision of the Commission, but it acts fully independently, and in that sense I'm not speaking for the European Commission. But indeed, it is our mission. It has been for 62 years now to ensure security of supply of nuclear materials and nuclear fuel in Europe. So far successful, as we, the market has been changing over 60 years. But what we can see now is really a change of the paradigm in the market. And we can already now see that we have seen it for many years, that the nuclear fuel cycle in the EU, but also outside the EU, is very much dependent on Russians. Uranium is abundant. There is a lot of uranium that could be mined outside of Russia. Russia is currently providing 25% of uranium for Euratom. but it is abundant. We have already started talking to Canada to see the possibility of opening the mines that are put in care and maintenance there, but that could really be reopened. And so this is not the bottleneck. Mm-hmm. The bottleneck happens later. In order to produce nuclear fuel, you have to go through a process of conversion, then enriching uranium, and then fuel fabrication.
So who is converting that?
And this is exactly the good question. Currently in the EU, 25% of uranium is converted by Russia. And that is now looking into future, that doesn't look a lot. 25% is not a lot. But if we were to replace Russian and possibly even Chinese conversion services, that would take at least 7 years from the decision to invest. Because there is no capacity in the West. Why? Because since 1990s, the Russians have been dumping conversion services. And it didn't make economical sense to invest in conversion capacity in Europe, but also in the US. The conversion capacity is actually only now being put back to reach the nameplate capacity. So this has been a bit of a conscious hybrid attack on the to ensure that Russia keeps the stake in the conversion.
So what you say is that they did it on purpose. They were not looking at market, but they were looking at their foreign and security agenda goals, and they used the nuclear dependence.
That has been very clear to us. I mean, I'm referring you to the reports of the EURATOM Supply Agency that has been repeating that year over year. Further, enrichment is not such a problem. The problem is also the last stage, which is the fuel fabrication. Mm-hmm. And it is a problem for a small group of reactors that are Russian design reactors, so-called VVR reactors. And this is where it is also another example where Russians were preventing alternative fuel from being used in those reactors through multiple measures that were again very low pricing, but also changing technology of the nuclear fuel. Nuclear fuel is engineered product. I mean, it's something that is not like aviation fuel. And they were changing the technology in order to prevent the new entrants. And the new entrants are only now trying to make it. Westinghouse from the US or EURATOM from France. But this has been this is a story that will continue in the coming years.
Especially during the discussion about the nuclear sanctions on Russia, because Rosatom was one of the options of as a target for EU sanctions, and it is not targeted yet. So this dependence might have an impact on this discussion, right?
I mean, the sanctions. Sanctions are a political decision, but sanction on Rosatom that would have immediate effect would very much undermine the security of supply of nuclear electricity, and it's nuclear electricity that will really be defining what the speakers in the previous panel called the geopolitical winter, and then the next geopolitical winter. So there is perhaps a space to build strong alternative supply to have the capacity to fully replace, but to do it in a staged way, because otherwise we could be creating a crisis on our own.
So Poland is not having this issue because it is not having the nuclear power plant yet. It's not good that we don't have it, but we are willing to have it in 2033. The first reactor should be ready in line with our program in 2033, and the government is in front of this decision with whom to build the nuclear power plant. Mr. Berger, could you elaborate a bit on this, what we've just heard about this importance of nuclear energy from our Polish perspective? Why do we need it for?
Thank you very much. As European Union, we have set the ambition to becoming the first climate-neutral continent. So we know how much important it is to search through all the solutions that can help us with this ambition. We are, as government, we are in front of making a very huge decision, and I think in a few weeks we can make it public, and I'm really cross my fingers to do it as soon as is possible, because there are many aspects of the moment of this decision. First of all, I think there would be never that much understandable in the society to make this decision, because as we know, as we can see in Germany, some other countries, nuclear is still sometimes it occurs fear. But I think now, due to the situation of the cruelty of Russia, I think this fear can be a little bit less than what we can see every day in television. So I think also due to all the regulatory obligations, but I mean also some public aid aspects, this is a very good time for Poland to negotiate the terms, how much we can need European help, because without a system of support, we will not have never nuclear power in Poland.
Okay, so you need to have some agreement inside with EC on how to finance the nuclear program in Poland, and they need to agree on some financing scheme, right?
I think financing is always the key issue, because when it's not a business issue, because this kind of investments without a public aid, it's not a business case. The business case comes later, but when you start it, when you have to have this kind of capex, when you have to go to the bank, you have to show something. And when your capex is planned for like 15 years, it's not like typical business issue. So I think there is now, after our decision with the Ministry of Energy, we have to discuss about the system of support. And I think it's a great opportunity to also discuss the system of support, not only for this huge investment, but also for SMRs. Because I think we can treat it in common. Because I think after Polish decision about establishing, the first site of nuclear, we need to develop surrounding for nuclear energy, but I mean also nuclear resources, nuclear knowledge, academics, and so on, to transform all the aspects that we need, also supply chain. But we need a decision first.
Okay, so what about the cooperation with Canada? Could we cooperate, for example, on nuclear fuel together?
I think it's maybe here a place for you, but I know that some of the Polish state-held companies already start joint cooperation, so I think there is a lot of surface.
Mr. Dion?
I think the world will not be less dependent to Russia without Canada. We are not the only solution, but we are a key one. I have some numbers of the 31 reactors that begin construction since 2017. All but 4 are of Russian or Chinese design. So that's the situation now. Russia controls, as you said, 43% of the world enrichment capacity. So we don't want to be dependent of the Russian regime for very valid reasons. We have this challenge, and Canada needs to be part of the solution. We're fully aware of that. It's why we came in Poland last week with a delegation, and we discussed not only nuclear plants with the CANDU reactors that we have around the world, not only the SMRs, where Canada needs to be a leader of the world, but also other services we may offer, like development and training in nuclear skills, robotics will be very key, nano filters, nuclear-grade pipes, cables, and so on. So Poland is interested to have MOU with us. We'll work on that, and we'll do it with a lot of countries around the world. But we don't want to overcommit. We cannot be a solution overnight.
Yeah.
This will take time.
SMRs
SMRs will not be ready before 2028 about. But at this very moment, we'll be very strong.
So Ms. Kaźmierczak was speaking about 7 years of getting rid of this dependence. What's your take on it? 7 years in Europe or more?
Well, it's about the same for LNGs. It's about the same for hydrogen. Canada will be the solution for all of that. But don't ask us to deliver for this winter. That's something we cannot.
And the winter, geopolitical winter is coming.
And one of the reasons is because as long as Europe was buying cheap Russian gas, it was very difficult for Canada to compete.
Yeah, because it was cheap then, and now we see how cheap it really is. Ms. Kaźmierczak, you wanted to add something on that?
In the EU, in EURATOM, we are dependent 31% on enrichment from Russia, so it's slightly lower, but we also are, a lot of European industry that could actually make it up. But if we are talking about a solution that should be open for the supply chain of nuclear fuel for the open world, meaning excluding Russia and China, the first thing we should be doing is to sit together and analyze the situation and have the shared assessment of what would be the needs and what is the capacity of the open world to in the nuclear fuel cycle. And this sort of shared analysis is advocated by Euratom Supply Agency and the European Commission. We have already had very, very satisfactory talks to Canada's government about that, but it would also need to include other big players, which is the US, the UK, South Korea, Japan, Australia. So that would be the that sort of assessment, I think, is necessary so that we do not start planning using the capacity and stealing it between ourselves. So that we actually, that could be the signal that could be given to the industry. This is how much will be needed in the years to come, in 7 years, in 10 years, so that they can also take their investment decisions based.
They need to be sure.
Based on that, they need to be sure. And there is currently the prices went up prices for conversion and for enrichment went up. Quite understandably. So there is a lot of hesitance in the market currently. And we think that sort of shared assessment and a harmonized solution would be the way to go forward.
So is getting rid of dependence on Russia making the countries realize that they need nuclear energy? Mr. Berger, Mr. Dion?
Well, about the countries would think they don't want to use nuclear energy. It's their choice. The only point Canada would like to make is it will make the world very unsafe regarding climate change if nuclear is not accepted as part of a solution. I will give you some numbers. Today, according to the International Energy Agency, nuclear energy provides 10% of global electricity supply, 10%. The whole clean electricity sources, so that means not coal, not natural gas, renewables and nuclear. Nuclear 10 plus 26 the other sources of clean energy. So 36% today of the electricity of the world is not emitting, 36%. If we want to be carbon neutral, the developed countries for 2050, which is our goal, the goal of the EU, the goal of Canada, the goal of the US, everyone. Well, according to the International Energy Agency, it's not 36% of the electricity that should be non-emitting for 2040, 20 years from now, 18 years from now. It is 85. From 36 to 85 in 20 years. Electricity should be not emitting. That means, according to them, we need to increase the global nuclear power generation by 80% between now and 2040. That's the numbers. If people think we may be carbon neutral for 2050 without nuclear, you need to do the maths.
So is Poland doing the math when it comes to climate neutrality, but also the dependence? Mr. Berger, what's your take on this issue of energy dependence and getting rid of it by entering the nuclear energy?
First of all, we've seen last time that stabilizing role of gas a little bit changed because of the prices.
Little bit, just a little bit, yeah.
So I think we have to redefine our standpoint in case also of nuclear, because in the case of gas, we've just opened a new connection, the Baltic pipe, due to engagement, my predecessor, Mr. Minister Piotr Naimski, and absolutely huge respect for the job that he's done. But just with the opening, we've seen the attack at the Nord Stream 1 and the second, and then we have to really redefine about all the sources of these stabilizing sources of energy, because now we can see that infrastructure that normally civil infrastructure in time of peace, but even on the war at your borders, nobody could even assume that something like that could happen in the civil infrastructure. So now we have to also look for the sources which can be independent. I mean, they are located inland with this very strong securitization of all the aspects of government. So absolutely, it's good time to make a decision and redefine. Generally, I'm a huge fan of renewables, and here also it's a very important role of nuclear for stabilizing.
Yeah, so we need to stabilize renewables, so we are meeting the climate goals. But I'd like to ask you a bit more about those unconvinced countries, because Mr. Dion said that, of course, it is their choice, but on the other hand, their choices impact whole Europe when it comes to supply of energy. And if they are not producing enough energy because they don't want to have nuclear energy, we all have less energy to be disposed among the member states. So, Mr. Berger, what's your take on countries which are not convinced? Do you try to convince them?
I'm not that much expert in this field, but I think on the political level, we have to, first of all, talk each other. And what I can see, and last days, also with our friends from Denmark, from Norway, from a lot of countries from Europe, there is a surface to talk about. And nowadays, really, we, like a few months ago, no one got these issues to underline, and now it's like top topic, the energy prices and all the energy securitization. So I think it's also our role to, first of all, trying to convince, but trying to clarify. And I think also the development of SMRs with some new technology solutions could convince people that we can have a cheap and safe energy sources.
Let's hope so, but how is it going from the point of view of EURATOM? You have all the countries on board, so you see how it goes. Did Energy Crunch change something? Do we have a wind of change when it comes to nuclear energy?
Well, I would say that Poland's decision to enter nuclear energy is something that has certainly been seen, and that it shows that this choice is a rational choice. I mean, we could have long discussions on the level of emotions, on the level of orthodox thinking. But looking rationally, and this is looking at the scenarios even made by the European Commission about reaching the 2030, 2050 targets. This is the necessary base load. This is the cheapest energy that we have, even considering the end of the fuel cycle, meaning all the questions related with the decommissioning and then nuclear waste. That still is a very reliable source. And I think that is, it's very difficult to convince those that don't want to be convinced. And it is the principle that the energy mix, and in particular the inclusion of nuclear, is the choice of a member state. But I think that this decision will be one looking what nuclear could offer is something that will be looked into very carefully by a number of member states. And this is also connected with the development of SMRs. I mean, let me be very, very frank. SMRs are not a replacement for big nuclear reactors because of the scale, and however, they are an excellent choice as complementing the big nuclear power plants, and also excellent choice for smaller member states who wouldn't need to go into the full-scale nuclear
the countries
power
like
plants.
Poland need the big conventional nuclear power plants.
Yeah, I believe that Poland, as a large member state, needs both, and they need both of them should be complementary, both in terms of the connection to the grid, location of industry, and many other elements.
Okay, gentlemen, could you elaborate on this distinction between small and big nuclear power plants?
You asked Mr. Jakóbik just before, do we try to convince countries that are reluctant? Well, we are Canadian. We respect the other point of view. I was in Germany for the last 5 years as ambassador. I did not spend a lot of time to convince the Germans to use nuclear. We discussed much more about hydrogen and LNG and other solutions. They don't want nuclear. Okay. But the world cannot be without nuclear. That's our view. I gave the numbers. If we want to be climate neutral on time to protect our planet, nuclear should be part of the solution. And every country willing to do so, Canada is ready to work with them, but we will be intransigent about security and non-proliferation. You want to work with us, accept these standards, because for us it's not something we're ready to negotiate and compromise about.
Okay, SMRs and big nuclear difference. Your take, maybe in Canada there will be some breakthrough when it comes to small modular reactors soon. So what's your take? Are they complementary or there are alternatives?
SMRs will be very needed. There is no doubt in our mind, and we'll be ready to be a champion of it. But again, there are dangers of proliferation, and we're well aware of that, and we'll make sure the standards are ironclad, secure for the world. That's key. I understand countries saying it's too dangerous, we should not go there. Our view is that we need to go there. It's part of the solution, but it must be properly done, and Canada will make sure that the technology we'll offer to the world will be completely safe.
It should be. Of course it should be. And Mr. Berger, SMRs and big nuclear?
Of course, in the Polish nuclear power program, we would like to get to 6 nuclear units with 6 to 9 gigawatts of capacity, with the first reactor working under 2033. But talking about the SMRs, it's like completely, of course, like Kaźmierczak said, it's completely two different things. So in the field of SMRs, I think somebody has to be first. I mean, with all the certifications, with some regulations of the PPA agreements by SMRs, we've got a great solution for future medium entrepreneurs who would like to stabilize, especially in these unstable times, the price of energy. And by setting this PPA, I think for even for medium businesses, by getting the SMRs real, but I think within really next early years we're gonna have it happen. I think it's also absolutely it's place for everybody here.
So just in the middle of our discussion about the nuclear renaissance that is happening all over the world, from the IAEA data we can see that, in general, we have this issue of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant that is being used by Russia to blackmail Europe, and some say that it is also a tool to make Europeans be again afraid of nuclear power plants. So how should we answer such instrumentalization of nuclear energy by Russia? What's your take on it? Wants to speak? Yeah, Mr. Berger, of course.
Here maybe I'm not that much proper person to talk about. I think it's all about this war is to make this fear and to have this, loopholes in regular normal way of thinking. That's maybe not now because of the Nord Streams, but they are trying to reestablish the old order that I think could never have place. I think we need to educate people. Because, as I said, maybe I'm not proper person to say, but even if there is any kind of pollution, I don't want to even call it like in public, but nearby the nuclear plant, it's only very close area which is polluted. Even when you read something about the Chernobyl catastrophe, it's not like it can happen to like the whole continent. Of course, there are many aspects of this, but nuclear energy, nuclear plant is not a nuclear weapon. What you mentioned. So I think we have to first of all educate people and get them the best knowledge to do not feel afraid.
Mr. Dion?
Today, I come back to climate. When we started to tackle climate change in 1990, the world, oil, gas and coal, fossil fuels, were 86% of the source of energy for the world. And today is still more than 80%. So we have a huge challenge facing us. And for Canada, our view is that everything should be part of the solution, which is safe and non-emitting. And nuclear is part of it. So I come back.
About Zaporizhzhia, Canada and Poland asked to let the inspectors from IAEA to enter the nuclear power plant. They were inside, so is this assuring for you that nothing will happen in Zaporizhzhia, that this event shouldn't be an argument against nuclear energy in Europe?
But what is an argument is an argument against war.
Yeah, obviously.
If we say we cannot build nuclear plants because we want to be back to war, but then what can we do? What is safe in the world? That what Putin has done, it's awful for the world, awful for Ukraine, awful for Russia, but awful for the world for many reasons. And one of the reasons is that now we have doubts about everything. Yeah. Then I don't know, when at the time when we need to pool all our resources to make our relationship with the planet sustainable, we spend so much more money to fight against each other instead of being all together. This war is an absolute tragedy.
From this perspective, also from climate perspective, it is obviously a tragedy, but when it comes to Zaporizhzhia and EURATOM, do you think that this event would influence our discussion? Is it influencing it? Is it fueling anti-nuclear movements?
Okay. Nuclear is powerful, and this is its beauty, but it comes with risks. So far, we have always been thinking how to prevent human error. And now we are somehow starting to think about a different type of risks. And in that sense, I think we all put a lot of support to the International Atomic Energy Agency and their group of observers and the efforts that they undertake in order to ensure that the situation in Zaporizhzhia is under international monitoring. Zaporizhzhia is a relatively modern power plant. It has nothing to do with the old Chernobyl type. It is now passively shut down. It is in the safe and stable condition. And of course, it does not say that the risks do not exist, not the risks of human error, but the risks that are based on a human decision. But it is not that easy to make a move that would endanger that would endanger Europe or further countries. That having said, yes, there is certain risk. It would probably be very much geographically focused in the area directly around Zaporizhia, but this is nothing to compare to any of the big crisis situations like 3 Miles, like Chernobyl, like Fukushima.
Okay, so we see how serious this discussion is, and we hear that the situation around nuclear power in Europe is changing, that we need to have it to pursue the climate neutrality, to have this energy independence. There are solutions for fuel supply, for different kinds of cooperation in our Western family to be more secure and more climate friendly in the same time. But what's your take on it? What are your questions? We have several minutes for a question for audience. We have a mic somewhere over there. There is someone coming, so take your time and grab the mic. Please present yourself, and could you ask a question? Oh, okay, so there's a room for a question. I thought that someone is coming, so no one is coming, but the nuclear energy is coming in Poland, I hope. If someone is not wanting nuclear energy in their own borders, let us have it. That's my take, that's my opinion. I have just one more question to our distinguished guests about the nuclear power plant future from the economic point of view. We have an economic crisis on the way. We should face it in places like WSF. We should be frank about those issues. So nuclear energy is a part of solution of economic crisis. What is the economic gain from the nuclear power plant? Yep.
I mean, I will add something very, very small, because I will talk only about nuclear fuel. As I said, Russia was actually artificially decreasing prices in the market, which means we will have to be paying more at each stage of the nuclear fuel cycle, from uranium mining through conversion, enrichment, and then fuel fabrication. But does it mean that the prices of electricity will go up? Not so much, because nuclear fuel price contributes only 10% to the price of nuclear generated electricity. So even if here we are talking about the price increase that would be below 2%, and that is something that should not be the triggering the inflation of the energy prices. So from that point of view, nuclear energy is helping keeping the energy prices at a reasonable level.
And we see how important is that, Mr. Dion?
Well, it's because nothing is cheap. Nothing is free. If we want to not use any more natural gas and coal and oil, well, the other solutions are solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, clean hydrogen, and CO2 carbon capture and storage using, again, coal and oil, but in capturing the CO2. All these technologies are very costly. and nuclear in many circumstances will be competitive. So Canada is not saying we should use nuclear at the expense of the other solutions, but it should be part of the solution because otherwise the amount of investments we'll need to do this energy transition will be much more complicated to find. And the intermittency of some of these sources of energy will be more difficult to cope with.
So we need nuclear energy as a base load. And Mr. Berger?
We are at the security forum, so I think there is one sentence that I can say, just security has no price. And it also in case of the nuclear, especially for not only for business, but for everyone, when you can have a stable source, you've got this certainty, forecasting, stabilizing aspects. So this is those crucial aspects for, for people, for business, for countries to develop. So I think, of course, we have to redefine after this crisis, which I really believe we are in the edge of, but yeah.
So, we are discussing nuclear energy in Poland for 30 years, and your people have this possibility to make a decision this way or another, but you can make a decision, and I keep my fingers crossed for it, because it should happen in several weeks, as you spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this wonderful conversation. It was Mateusz Berger, Government Plenipotentiary for Strategic Energy Infrastructure in Poland. Minister Stéphane Dion, the Prime Minister Special Envoy from Canada to EU and Europe, and Ms. Agnieszka Kaźmierczak, the Director General of EURATOM Supply Agency. Thank you very much. Big applause for our panelists.